Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Uma. I'm the other co-founder of The Star in Me. Mahua and I founded The Star in Me with an intention to bridge the gender gap in the workforce. All of you have logged into The Star in Me to register for the event. I hope you took some time to explore the platform. We have some amazing content on the platform. There are several events that are coming up, both in terms of webinars as well as curated learning programs that you can leverage. We currently have over 4,000 women from across 46 countries on the platform. So leverage this opportunity to connect with other women on the platform, have conversations. There are a lot of interesting groups, including a group called the Book Club, where we keep discussing what book to discuss next. So Rashmeet might soon start a poll on which book we will pick up next month. So do contribute ideas and check out the platform. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. So let's get started. Again, like I mentioned, we usually pick the book of the month based on a poll that we conduct on the Star in Me and on some of our other social media channels. So this particular book won by a huge majority amongst the other books that we had suggested. It is a bestseller, so some of you may have heard about this book. Let's get going and dive ahead into the book. I'll start off by, this is in fact, our second book club session. I think Swati attended the previous one also. Thanks for your feedback, Swati. We'll continue to do this once a month at least. So I'll start off by reading a couple of snippets from the book, things that really caught my attention. And let's reflect on those points a bit and see if they resonate with you and discuss those. So here are the first two lines in the book. There is a quality that sets some people apart. It is hard to define, but easy to recognize. With it, you can take on the world. Without it, you live stuck at the starting block of your potential. Just two lines, but then so much meaning hidden within these lines, right? I mean, with confidence, you can really take on the world, because once you have that confidence, whether it is real or not, at least it will prompt you to try. And without confidence, even if you're probably the most talented, the smartest person in the room, you still may not even get off the starting block because you have this fear that is inhibiting you. Let me go on to a couple of other anecdotes, and then I'll open it up for discussion to see if you've, faced this during your corporate career. So there are these lines which I can completely relate to. This book particularly talks about the confidence gap that most women face in the workforce, in their careers. And it says that the way women are wired, while our brains are wired similarly for men and women, if you look at an MRI of the brain, it is quite similar amongst men and women. But there are several characteristics that kind of differentiate the way both genders react to situations, the amount of confidence that they feel. Some of these, they say, are nature versus some of these being nurture. In fact, there is an example in the book which says boys tend to play sports more. They get into the playground and fight with each other and so on. They say during those fights, as a small kid, a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old, you have other boys, calling you names, insulting you and so on. And you get so used to it, you eventually just tend to brush it off and say, it's fine. I've heard this so many times. Whereas a lot of women, even if somebody were to say one thing about us, we ruminate it for hours and days together. Oh, why did they say this? Did I really do something wrong? And, you waste so much time pondering about it. So these are a couple of anecdotes that the authors state, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. So they say, imagine all the things over the years you wish you had said or done or tried, but didn't because something held you back. Chances are that something was a lack of confidence. Without it, we are mired in unfulfilled desires, running excuses around in our heads until we are paralyzed. It can be exhausting, frustrating, and depressing. Have you all, and maybe I'll open it up for discussion, at least I have faced this a lot of times in my career and also while I was studying. There are so many instances when I'm in class, when I was in college doing my MBA, or when I'm in a meeting while I was working, somebody would ask a question or there's a brainstorming session going on and I'd have this brilliant idea in my head. But then I would think about it for so long. What will people think if I put up this idea? Maybe it's a very stupid idea. Should I even talk about it? Why take the risk? I might as well sit quietly. And a couple of minutes later, somebody else would raise their hand, most probably a guy. He would probably say the same idea or something slightly less impactful than that. And they would get so much praise and I would end up beating myself about it. Why didn't I at least raise my hand and talk about this? But not that it changed. It had to happen at least 20 times before I found the courage to raise my hand. So I'd like to open this up for discussion. If anyone wants to talk about whether they faced any situations like this, either about speaking up, raising your hand, not just in meetings, but raising your hand for a project, for an initiative that people asked you to take up. Did you ever face such a situation and eventually regret not having done it, not having had the courage to do it or the confidence? Rashmeet, I saw you nodding. Do you want to go next?
It just brought back memories from early days. Yeah, I was 16 and I was real good at maths, and I knew it. I was really good at it because I worked very hard at it. And I remember my professor, he'd just look at me knowing that I would have solved that question within 5 seconds, 6 seconds. He just know it. And I would not raise my hand, and a guy sitting in the front bench, like literally next to me, would solve 5-7 seconds later, and then he'll raise his hand and suddenly everyone would start hooting, that he's the guy, he's the dude. And he'd just look at me, and I wanted to think that, why didn't I raise my hand at that point? But then this beautiful thing happened wherein my professor was the external push. He started asking, so Rashmeet, what's the answer, within 3 seconds of him giving out the question. And I'll panic, not knowing what to say. And I'll just look in the crowd, but it took me around 20, 30 attempts to finally say it out loud. And there has been no turning back. Now I'm generally the one speaking, the first one speaking in the room, because I think it's like an addiction. If you know that you are good at stuff, and if you speak up and people listen, might as well do it always.
That is so true. Very nice. Thanks for sharing, Rashmi. Does anyone else want to talk about their experience or if you relate to it before we move on?
Yeah, I won't say I relate to it all the time because I don't know where it came from. I have always been a very confident person. At times I did make fool of myself, trying to do something I couldn't do because obviously there are restrictions as well. But one thing I've learned that not having confidence can actually be your biggest enemy at the end of the day. So I'll share an experience. I used to be a good swimmer. So on the first year of my swimming lessons, I actually got to represent my club in a inter-club competitions, and I was practicing for 50 meters course. So what happened on that day, and I was really good at it. I knew, I was really ready to get the gold for the club, and I was so happy. Even before going inside the pool, I was like, okay, I'll get a gold for the club. Then what happened right before the competition started, my coach came to me and he said that, okay, I think you should go for 100 meters. So I said, why? I practice for 50 meters. Well, no, there are other people who can do good in 50 meters as well, but I think you'll do better in 100 meters. And I begged him that I want to go for 50 meters. I cannot go for 100 meters. And he kept on pushing me, no, you have to go for 100 meters only. So when I jumped on the pool, I thought I'm going to lose. I'm not going to win it because people who were competing with me, they were pretty good actually. I knew them. But after going inside the pool, after like 30-40 seconds, I realized that, okay, let me just give it a shot. You know what happened? I came second, and the difference between me and the first person was only 2 seconds. And I beat myself up because I wasted that 30 seconds on pool thinking, okay, I can't do it. And I was thinking that, what if I didn't say that to myself? What is, I was equally confident about winning a gold in 100 meters the way I was confident about winning, I was not so confident about winning it in 100 meters. I could have won that gold. So that silver was like, a reminder that no matter what happens, don't lose confidence. You may not win it. I have lost a lot of race, and I have lost in a lot of things, but since then I have made it a point to myself that I'll never ever go in a competition or in anything else thinking that I cannot do it. Yeah, that's my story.
Thanks for sharing, Sucharita. In fact, that is amazing. One of the aspects that the authors talk about in this book is about hesitation. They say
Yeah.
we're prone to hesitation. You know, even if we know the answer, even if we know this is the right thing to do, there is that momentary hesitation where we still wonder, you know, should I go ahead or should I not? So it's an amazing example to help us relate to that concept.
Yeah, and also again the competition I was preparing for an all girls 50 meters, and I was pushed to do an 100 meters, which was like a mixed one. So I was the only girl who got that, who won, and I still think that I could have been the one to get the gold, but I was like, I lost to myself actually.
That's an amazing story. Thanks for sharing. And this is something you should share with your children to encourage them and teach them that lesson as they grow up.
Yeah, I should.
Uma, can I speak?
Yes, yes, please.
So I think I related more to the point that you spoke, where the author has written about small criticisms that, you know, people face, or when, because guys are more used to and they play a lot of sports and things like that. So I think I personally face that a lot of times. Like, I'm like, now I have of course overcome it and I have changed a lot, but initially I was like that. So when people used to say something about me and which I felt was not right or which hurt me, I used to dwell on it, ponder on it. I think that is I think the author has said it in a very right manner, very apt manner, that sometimes girls tend to focus on all this a lot more compared to guys. And I think that all the girls should overcome this sort of a pondering on negativity and, you know, dwelling on the past and things like that. Yeah, so I resonated with that.
Yeah, yeah, that is great. Thanks for sharing, Hitesha. Here's another
I have something to share here. So, just sort of continuing with what Hitesha was just talking about. So, I have recently been actually debating this with my husband quite a lot. We got married recently, and I always, you know, sort of tell him that like why do you and your friends talk to each other like that? Like, because men interact that way, right? They make fun of each other. They, you know, sort of pull their legs, just, you know, say names. And I always find it very crass. And I always tell him, why do you guys talk to each other like this? Because if some of my friends were to talk to me like this, I would not like it at all. I would not like to be their friend. And, you know, I just actually finished this part of the book, and it sort of spoke to me like, that does bug us a lot, I think, more than what men go through. And that, I think, has a bigger correlation with how we deal with failure in life. So I sort of related it back to the first point that the author also makes, right? That women have a bigger tendency to dwell on failures. I think this comes from that as well. Not sure how we're going to fix this, or, you know, what is the way to go, because I still haven't completed it. But yeah, the kind of conditioning, the kind of environment there, so the nurture part of it kind of shows.
Yeah, that is true. In fact, she does talk a lot about dwelling on failure, and amongst the tips that she shares, that they share at the end, she talks about not thinking about failure too much. It's okay if you fail; it's not the end of the world. So there are suggestions around that towards the end of the book. So let me read this other statement, which again I could relate to completely, and this, you know, with respect to our work life. She says, women have long believed that if we just work harder and don't cause any bother, our natural talents will shine through and be rewarded. But then we have watched as the men around us got promoted over us and got paid more too. We know deep down they are no more capable than we are. Indeed, often they are less so, but they project a level of comfort with themselves that gets them noticed and rewarded. That comfort, that self-assurance is confidence, or at least their version of it. And I can completely relate to this. At least in the first 3 years of my corporate life, I used to seriously think that, if I put my head down, sat in my little cubicle at the corner of the work floor and did my work, sincerely and earnestly, my brilliance will just shine through and people will reward me and promote me. But I realized later that it doesn't happen that way. You have to speak up, make yourself visible. You have to promote yourself in the right forums. And only then do you get recognized. And I'd like to take a pause and see if anyone can relate to this. Brenda, can you give us a perspective since you're joining us from the US? Do you relate to this?
Yes, I do. Morning, guys. Oh, sorry. Good evening. Yes, I do. And it actually resonates with my current position as a Scrum Master. And in most cases, I cannot speak up in front of a big crowd. My tone changes. I get scared. And as I was reading the book and just trying to resonate with the Agile framework, whereby there are short cycles. And the whole reason of short cycles is so that you learn. We as women, we don't think that way, whereby through mistakes, the more you make those mistakes, the more you keep on learning. And as I was reading and I was trying to reflect on Agile, I noticed that it's okay to fail. That's the only way I'm going to learn. If I get embarrassed today, or if I don't say anything right today, tomorrow I will try and be better at it. But we just don't do that. We have this negative voice that keeps on saying, don't do it. Don't stand up. And the frustrating thing is I actually had one of my colleagues who got certified whilst he was a programmer, and he got certified. He became a Scrum Master, but he didn't have that much experience. But because he is vocal, he has actually climbed the ladder better than I. Because I'm not that vocal. He is willing to be embarrassed. He just says things and then somebody has to correct them. And that's what we women, we don't do that. And one other thing that she also mentioned in the book is men go out. They go out to these social events and they meet people. They are not shy. We are different. We are not that outgoing. We don't mingle like after hours where people stay and talk. You get to know the executives. We are shy. We don't do that. So if only we could get that confidence to bloom the way we are supposed to, then everything will be okay. It's something that I'm still learning. I'm still trying to finish the book, but this is a very great book, especially for me. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Brenda. In fact, you said it very well when you said it'll allow us to bloom the way we are supposed to. So I think confidence is probably the one factor that will help us unleash the potential that lies dormant in so many women. So I think it's extremely important to work on confidence. Is there anyone else who'd like to talk about this before we move on? Okay, then we'll move on. Here is a piece of research that has come out, scientific evidence, and this might come as a shock to most people. In fact, it came as a shock to me. So it says, perhaps most striking of all, we found that success correlates more closely with confidence than it does with competence. Yes, there is evidence that confidence is more important than ability when it comes to us getting ahead. This came as particularly unsettling news to us, having spent our own lives striving towards competence. So what this means to say is that when it comes to success, right, successful people are not necessarily the most competent people in the room or in the world, but they are usually the most confident people. And there is this interesting study that is outlined in the book, and I'd like to share that with all of you. So there is this professor who's doing a study on whether competence is more important or confidence. So he runs this test where he asks his students, I'm going to give you a list of historical events, places, and names. a list of some 50 or 100 such historical details. And he says, put a tick on the ones that you're aware of. So once that list is shared, he says that a lot of boys, in fact, put a tick against things that are not even real. Some random name of some Captain Murphy or Murphy's Last Ride and so on, which doesn't even exist, which is fake. And they started putting ticks on that. So it basically shows that and they were not, the boys or the guys were not trying to cheat. They just felt that, maybe I've heard of this, or maybe I know this is a historical event. So they were just more confident. And eventually it turned out that obviously the guys were the ones that rated more, put in more ticks on that paper. So they ended up being the ones that were, that seemed like they were more aware of these events than the women. And after studying the pattern over a year, so he did this test during the beginning of that academic, course. He says towards the end of that course, if you notice, the guys who had rated themselves high on this particular test, as in they put a tick against those things that were not even real, they ended up being the most popular ones and the most respected ones in the class. So you just, and considered to be the most successful. So they were not trying to fake it, but the fact that they spoke or interacted with so much confidence, even about things that they weren't really sure of, made them succeed. So I'll take a pause again to see if you all have experienced this in your life, and do you agree with this? I mean, obviously it's scientific evidence, we cannot refute it, but then have you seen instances in your life which tend to corroborate to this fact?
I think I'll just share my experience on this.
Yeah.
So prior to joining the academic research at IIIT Bangalore, I was working in some of the corporate companies. And as Brenda mentioned, I think I faced this a lot of times. And as you yourself mentioned, Uma, that, we just think that if we do our work properly and if we are competent enough, it is good enough. And we don't tend to make ourselves more visible or try to go out and interact. So I think, all these points resonated with me a lot, because I have noticed that men are inherently more confident, even if they don't know. That is a separate thing. Even if they don't know, they can, just portray that confidence a lot. But we women tend to hesitate. So I have faced this myself, because I too had this notion that, if we just work hard and do our work, it's more than enough. But I was proved wrong. And I realized that later that, this is not the way to go about. So I relate this a lot.
Thanks, Hitesha. That makes sense. And since you are also in the field of academics, I think it helps to get your perspective. Does anyone want to talk about this before we move on?
Yes.
Yes, Brenda.
Just to add on to that, I think there is also a part in the book where a lady lawyer confesses that she did not speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she went to the boss said, but you don't ask. That's the reason why she was not getting promoted. And that resonates with most of us. There is another book that is also mentioned in Confidence Code called Women Don't Ask. We don't ask. You want a promotion? Ask for it because you deserve it. You've worked hard for it. But because we don't talk and we don't mingle with the right people, we don't have somebody to speak on our behalf, and we have to talk. So that's one of the things that I got from the book, that we need to speak up as women.
Yeah, that is so true, Brenda. In fact, for the benefit of those who've not read the book, the incident that Brenda is talking about is when this lady who is extremely good at her work, she keeps getting passed up for promotions. She doesn't get promoted. And obviously she keeps thinking to herself that, maybe something is wrong or I'm not good enough. One day she gathers courage to go and ask her boss, why am I not getting promoted? And he says, but you never asked for it, or, I never really thought about it. So the fact of the matter is, it's not that he thought that she lacked potential. It's just that he was so busy and there were so many other things on his mind, or maybe other things that needed to get done, that he did not think of this particular aspect. And just because she eventually found the courage to ask, she then got evaluated and then got promoted also. So I don't know how many opportunities all of us have missed out on just because we did not find the courage to ask for them. If we've not already learned that lesson through our lives, I think we should learn it now and start practicing.
Another correlation, though she is kind of told in two different places, this is about confidence and competence, but it's highly correlated with her line that she talks about transform thought into action, right? I think the reason why confidence beats competence in the long run, because we do not action. If we do not action and it's just procrastination that's going on, obviously people around do not see you confident because you have not even tried on it. So in fact, an extension to the experiment that Uma spoke about, there's another professor in Columbia University, he did that where he wanted to actually see, there are a lot of theories talking about that the left brain and the right brain for men and women are different. His point was it's not different, it is same. So how can you run the hypothesis? So he had given kids puzzles, exactly same puzzles to boys and girls. And like Uma said on the first one, the boys they did not know a lot of stuff, but they ticked, they got something. And the girls, whenever they did not know, they kept it blank because they wanted to be perfect. They didn't want to do something wrong over there. And obviously when the scores came out, the guys did much better than girls. So he was not okay with the results. So unlike the one that's given in the book, he said this time he changed the rule. He said, irrespective of whether you know it or you do not know it, you have to respond to all the questions. You cannot leave anything blank. Now, just with that one particular statement in the next experiment, the girls fare much better in the next one. So I think girls, by our brain, we just let go of things, and this entire trap of perfectionism, the entire trap of overthinking and procrastinating kind of beats our confidence, and that's a vicious loop that all of us, I think, have innumerable examples in our lives that we have lost, or but it's great time that we are all here so that in future we can take care of it. Just wanted to put this point.
It reminds me of a quick funny story. I was in the final year of my undergraduation, and we were having the placement seasons, wherein companies were pouring in. Now there were some examinations which I was particularly scared of because I felt those are the skills that I don't need for the profile that I want to work in, but yet they were the qualifiers. And since I'm a mechanical engineer, most of my peers were guys. So I asked them the same question. Do you face the same nonsense? We have the similar career goals and yet we have to go through these stupid exams. So one of them told me something very interesting. You know what? Even if you don't know stuff, firstly go through the paper once, do whatever you know of. And in the second round, just pick an option B or a C throughout all of it. I said, why? Why will I do that? He said, you know what? Doesn't matter. If you have to get rejected, you will get rejected anyway. And I remember I was sitting in that examination with the very first one, and after seeing the question, I knew that I just knew 50% of it. For the rest 50%, I swear I marked all options B. You know what? I actually landed up getting selected. I actually landed up getting that interview, and it was later that I realized in that interview that I was too good for that position. So I also landed up walking out of that interview saying, sorry, this position is not how you describe it to be. Just a funny story of how, we can take things lightly. And that's something I learned from guys, around me.
That is so great, Rashmi. Thanks for sharing. In fact, there is another very interesting study, and we probably always knew it, but it's good to see data prove this. So at Manchester Business School in England, there is this professor, Madeline Davidson. She apparently does this survey every year where she asks her students as soon as they join what they expect to earn or what they deserve to earn after they graduate from that particular course. So she says on average, the men think they deserve $80,000 a year, whereas the women think they deserve $64,000 a year. So she says scientifically it is proven year after year that effectively believe % less valuable than men. Now, this is basically us valuing ourselves much lesser than we really are worth. So, and that contributes a lot to a lack of confidence or having less confidence. Does anyone want to talk about this before we move on and see what are those key aspects of confidence that the authors talk about? Okay, so let's move on. So the authors say that there are four aspects which are key or core to the concept of confidence. They call these the confidence cousins. The four aspects are, the first one is self-esteem. So self-esteem, as all of us know, is basically us thinking that we are valuable, we have our own place in the world, and we are worthy of whatever we get in life. So self-esteem is extremely important, and it is a factor for having self-confidence. The second one is a sense of optimism. So she says confident people are usually the ones who are also optimistic. They generally have a feeling of optimism. They think that things will work out in their favor. And because of that, they are not afraid to take risks. And even if they take risks and they fail, that optimism takes them forward. They tell themselves that, okay, fine, I may have failed now, but I'm sure the next attempt will work out. So the second aspect is optimism. The third aspect is self-compassion. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of self-compassion in the past. So the easiest way to describe self-compassion is sometimes we tend to beat ourselves up when we do not do a good job or when we don't live up to our own standards of perfection. So self-compassion, the authors say, is, let's say a friend comes to you, one of your close friends, and says, hey, Uma, I didn't do a good job in this interview, or I didn't do a good job with this project. Now, being a good friend, will I actually shout at her and say, you know, Mahua, that was really bad of you and you should have paid more attention, and, you know, why didn't you prepare for it well? Or would I, as a good friend, say, you know what, doesn't matter. I think the fact that you tried is good enough, and I'm sure you'll do a good job next time. So research actually shows that most of the time, in fact, 100% of the time, when one of our close friends comes to us and says, I have a problem or I've done something wrong, we encourage them. We show compassion, we empathize, and we encourage them to do better. But when it comes to ourselves, we keep beating ourselves up. So the author says self-compassion is so important, and it's a huge factor contributing towards self-confidence. So that is a third characteristic. The final characteristic is self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is when you think that once, whatever job it is that you're planning to do, you will be able to do a good job with it. So you're efficient enough and you will be able to do that job effectively. So the confidence that you can do a good job at whatever you're striving to do, that is the fourth characteristic. So these four confidence cousins are very important. Self-esteem, optimism, self-compassion, and self-efficacy. I'll take a pause now to see if any of you want to talk about any of these aspects with reference to confidence. Anyone? Okay, let's move on then. We have 20 minutes to go, and I want to cover a couple of things. So at the end of the book, the authors actually, after several studies that they have done, gathered scientific evidence and so on, they come up with tips for us to ensure that we build confidence over time. So these are the tips, and I'll talk about them one by one. The first tip is to leave your comfort zone. Like Mahua was saying, in order to demonstrate and manifest confidence, the first thing to do is to take action. You know, if we sit in our comfort zone and say, oh, this is too risky, or I've never tried it and I don't think I can succeed at it, our confidence will never improve. So the first thing is to leave your comfort zone. Sometimes just take risks for the heck of it. You know, if the author already says that, she says, if you're afraid of speaking out in a big room, at work, speak out in a smaller room. You know, when you're sitting in a cafeteria with 5 or 6 of your friends, just speak up in that particular gathering, and then you'll get confidence to speak up in larger boardrooms and meeting rooms later. So leaving your comfort zone is the first step towards enhancing your confidence. Does anyone want to talk about this before I move on? Brenda, I saw you nodding about this. Did you do anything to leave out of your comfort zone recently?
Well, I suffer from racing brain, especially when I get into the boardroom and I need to speak. I say so many things at the same time, but it's not like I don't know what I want to say. It's just that my heart is pumping so much and I'm just rushing to say things. So one of the things that a colleague of mine told me was just breathe and keep on breathing and learn to pause as you speak. Give your time to just relax and then talk. Relax and then talk. People are not worried that you are pausing. It's only you who is feeling it, that, oh, people are expecting me to talk. And as I've been practicing that, I've actually been improving in the way that I speak in front of people. So yeah, I resonate with that. That's why I was laughing.
Thanks, Brenda.
One of the things I want to add, because at least I have experienced in my 18 years of corporate life, I think I've moved across working different verticals, different industries. And every 2 to 3 years I've changed. And every time, though I was in the same organization, it was all different team, different location. And if you start early doing this, it becomes a habit. So wherever you are, whichever phase of your career you are, I think you just start off. Don't think, because if you keep on doing futuring in your brain and visualizing futuring, it's going to get more complex. So if you just do the first change, believe me, it's all your future changes are going to be super easy. So just always at first, moving out of comfort zone is the most difficult one. But if you're able to do that and put yourself together and start working around it, and you get yourself familiarized to it, you would see all your future movements or all your future changes in career. Because unfortunately, I mean, Brenda, you're the only one who are, you're not from our culture. Culturally, we are very risk averse. We don't want to take risks. Okay, so most of us, 99% of us have single career. We can't think about multiple careers. We can't think about an engineer, then becoming a lawyer and then shifting to it. We don't do that. We are very risk averse. So and I think it's changing slowly, and it's because we think too much of future and security. And what if I leave, what's going to happen? What's going to be my financial status? I think that's what we have to be very, very cognizant about and make that first step. The first step done, believe me, everything else is so easy the next times. So I really want to share this.
Thanks, Mahua. So it's time for some more anecdotes which are surprising, and I think these points need to be drilled down into our minds too. So the authors say one international study shows that 90% of all women want to change at least one aspect of their physical appearance. And she gives a very funny anecdote here. She says there is this world-renowned speaker who helps people in enhancing their public speaking skills. So she usually runs workshops, and there is standing room only. So these workshops are booked so much in advance. So during these workshops, she actually makes people record short snippets of themselves talking. And then she makes them watch it again so that, they can learn from their own body language and the way they speak so that they improve. And this lady says that 90% of the time when she's playing back a video of a woman to herself, the woman will say, "Oh, my hair looks so funny. Oh, my dress doesn't look good. Oh, look at the way I was sitting and it's not good." So she says, women should need to get out of that mindset and start focusing on what they're saying and how they're projecting, and not really about the way their hair looks and so on. So that is one interesting study from the book. And I'll read out another thing which I'm sure all of you can relate to. The authors say, have you ever noticed that women tend to be really good at taking the blame for things gone bad and crediting fate or other people or anything but themselves for successes? And perhaps you've also noticed men do the opposite. The stories we tell ourselves about the roots of our success and failure are the foundations of self-assurance. So basically she's saying when something goes wrong, we are very quick to go up and say that, okay, sorry, I must have made a mistake, or I am partly responsible for this. But when when something is successful and people praise us, then we bring everyone into the picture. My team did this, my manager did this, someone else did this. and we are not very happy to take the entire credit for ourselves. So that's one thing that the author talks about, which I am sure a lot of us can relate to. If anyone wants to share anything, feel free. Otherwise, I'll move on to the other tips that the author has shared. So the next tip the author shares is don't ruminate, rewire. So whenever something goes wrong, when you're facing failure, or when you attempted something and it hasn't gone very well, she says stop ruminating. Don't think about it forever. It'll only discourage you further, and it'll set itself in your mind as a failure. Don't allow it to do that. Rewire your brain. Say that, okay, fine, this hasn't worked well. Let me identify what are the 2-3 things that I can probably change in future, and then do it. And she says, in order to do this, in order to rewire and stop ruminating, you need to do one thing, which is kill gnats. And the full form of gnat is negative automatic thoughts. So she says, as soon as something goes wrong, our brains are so quick and we are so fast to come up with things. Hey, you did a bad job at this. You didn't speak well. You didn't prepare well, and so on. So she says, stop those negative automatic thoughts and replace them with something else. Only then will you be able to, move past that failure with confidence and go on to doing something better. So that's the second tip that the author has for us. Remember gnats. And she says journaling is one way to get rid of these negative automatic thoughts. She says, at the end of the day, take track of whatever those negative thoughts are that have come up in your mind. And once you make note of this and look back at it after a point, you will then realize that this is a pattern that you can actually stop and control on your own. The third tip she says is from me to we. So again, going back to the point where she says, whenever there is a failure, we say, we are solely responsible, but when there's a success, we get everyone into the loop. So the authors say that move away from me to we. For instance, if I'm going to make a presentation, to a large crowd, or I'm getting into a public speaking sort of an event. So she says, instead of going there and thinking, while you're preparing for it or while you're stepping onto the stage, instead of thinking, oh my God, I'm now going to speak to an audience of about 100 people, God knows how this will go, and so on. Tell yourself instead that I have a huge responsibility now. I'm here to represent my team or my company or my, company for this particular event. And what I say matters, and hence let me go and do a good job. So she says, when you shift the focus from you as a person to who you are representing as a team, it makes a huge difference and gives you a burst of confidence. So that is the third tip. The fourth thing she says is it's not personal. So on a lot of occasions, all of us women are quite sensitive. So everything that happens, we take it personally. Oh, this must have happened because of something that I did, and it's a characteristic that I'm not very good at, and so on. So she says, don't take it personally. And another thing that she mentions, which has stuck with me, and it took me a very long time to realize, is if I don't do a good job, right? First of all, sometimes we are very critical of ourselves. Let's say I've spoken up in a meeting and eventually I couldn't speak very well, or I made a mistake, or I gave some idea which was not very brilliant. I will then think, okay, God, oh my God, there were 15 people in that room. What would they have thought about me? What if I meet them in the cafeteria? Will they, look at me and think she's so dumb? Or what will they, next time in a meeting with all these people, how can I raise my hand again? But she says, and I've also realized this over a long period of time, everyone is extremely busy in their own lives. Don't be so narcissistic so as to think that everybody's thinking about what you said in that meeting and how it reflected on them. Everyone, the moment they walk out of that meeting, they would probably have forgotten about it. So don't give yourself that much importance. Nobody remembers your mistakes. You are the only one who remembers it. So I'll take a pause now because I see a lot of people seem to resonate with this. Does anyone want to talk about this? Shivangi?
Yeah, I've actually sort of recently came across this revelation myself, like before reading the book itself, where, I used to, keep thinking, that in a meeting of 20 people, what is he or she thinking about me? I may be missed out a few points, or maybe, you know, I made a couple of mistakes. But then I started to realize that, you know, like post the meeting, everyone is just busy with their own work, their own lives. It's not like they're sparing, you know, hours of their day thinking about what I messed up on. I'm the only one who's doing it, and it's just, you know, taking away time from my end. So I think I need to stop doing it. So I totally relate with that.
Thanks, Shivangi.
I'd also like to add here that, you know, if people really do care, they will take the effort, you know, to come and give you the feedback. So there is really nothing to worry about, because otherwise maybe they just don't care at all.
Yeah. Asta, you were also saying something?
So, well, I was just hearing out all the things, and I mean, each and every point which we discussed over here, I can completely resonate. And I have seen, I mean, I have around 13, 14 years of career, and I have, you know, seen stages wherein I have held myself back, which has affected my career growth as well, where I could not promote myself, I could not speak before the crowd and explain what exactly, you know, basically my thought process or my ideas or whatever, and it has definitely affected at different stages. So yes, but there has been a learning, there has been immense learning, and especially when I moved to a corporate, a bigger, larger environment where you have so much of complexities around, and if you don't speak up, you are sitting, you may just end up your career in sitting in one corner, and nobody will notice. So I have realized the importance of it, and I've started implementing it more often now. And I can only say that, yeah, it has bring changes. I mean, till the time I was not speaking, I was not getting noticed. The moment I realized the importance of it, I have seen the changes around me. And I used to think that, you know, I don't know how people will react to it, whether I will make sense to them or not, or they may, just like you mentioned, you know, later on I used to think, after speaking also, I used to think that, you know, I don't know what these folks will be thinking about me. Everyone is looking at me. They are thinking of just about me only because I was the one who was trying to make my point, and others were sitting silent, or I don't know whether they agree to me or not. So many questions, you know, so many overthinking we do after, you know, delivering as well, which needs to stop. And looking at all the suggestions which are coming through this book, I'm very excited to read and gain out, you know, the best. Thank you.
Thanks, Asta. In fact, here, you know, there's another thing that the authors say about not taking it personally. They say that sometimes when people give you feedback, right, it's not about you as a person. It is from a place of wanting to make you better at whatever you're doing. They're either giving you feedback about your skill or something else, but not you as a person. So for instance, and they give a few examples, and they say this is something we should teach our kids also, our daughters as they're growing up. So if someone tells you that outfit isn't going to work, instead of saying, oh my God, I wore this and nobody likes it, and, you know, feeling bad and maybe my choice is bad, don't I have this, you know, business sense to know what to wear to work and all, just tell yourself, or, you know, say to that person, what would you like me to wear? Or how do you think I should change it? You know, since that you're already in office, you can't go back home and change it, but, you know, ask for suggestions on how you can make it better. Or if somebody tells you, you're singing through your nose, and, you know, this is a music teacher telling a girl, you're singing through your nose again, stop it, that sounds terrible. And the girl says, thank you for telling me that, I'll try to do better. You know, because in this situation, the coach is not trying to make fun of that girl or criticize her. He's just giving her this feedback to make her perform better in future. So don't take it personally all the time. And that is something that all of us women should, you know, keep in mind. The next one that the author says is, there are times when we should star in our own production, you know, which is when there is credit, when credit is being given, please go up there and get the award and take the trophy and take the compliments that are being offered to you for yourself. And you must thank your team and so on, but don't shy away from saying that, okay, fine, my team did everything and I don't deserve it, or, you know, belittle your contribution. So take credit when it is given to you because you do deserve it. The next thing she says is practice is extremely important for confidence. And they talk about a lot of instances when they give examples of sports people, you know, how they keep practicing until there comes a point when they are so confident that they can do it. And I'm sure someone mentioned, right? I think it was Brenda or someone who said that once you start doing it a couple of times, then it starts coming to you much more easily in future. So you raise your hand the first time, it's going to look odd. The second time, it's slightly better, but it's still a little odd. But the 10th time onwards, it comes to you very naturally. Like Rashmeet said, now she's probably the first person to raise her hand anytime somebody needs to speak up. So keep repeating, keep practicing. That's a huge boost for confidence. The next thing is to speak up. We've spoken about that already. It is very important to speak up and share your views. You need not be right all the time. And sometimes there is no right or wrong answer at all. It's a matter of opinion and you must make your voice heard. So don't hesitate to speak up ever. And then finally, the author gives a couple of do's and don'ts with respect to confidence. She says these are micro confidence boosters. So things that you should do on a daily basis in order that over a period of time, your confidence gets enhanced. So these are very simple things. The first thing is meditate. Because when you meditate, apparently it makes changes to your prefrontal cortex. I don't know if I'm saying all these terms right, but it basically eliminates the fear that you have in your mind, those inhibiting, self-limiting sort of behaviors or beliefs that you have in your mind. So meditation is extremely important. The second thing she says is to be grateful. Be grateful for good things that are happening to you, because that in turn makes you more optimistic as a person. When you recognize all the good things that are happening in your life, you tend to be more optimistic about future. And you know, optimism is one of the confidence cousins, right? So being grateful is one thing you must do. The third thing is to think small. If you have a large project looming in front of you, it might look scary, but then break it down into component parts, and then it will seem much more manageable. So think small, especially when it comes to large projects or anything large that you need to do. The next thing is sleep, move, and share, she says. So one, you need to get enough sleep to be at your best at any point in time. That's when you get confidence. The second thing is keep moving. You know, when you move, when you walk, when you exercise, even your brain thinks faster and it gets a spurt of creativity. Sharing again increases empathy, which increases your overall sense of well-being and optimism. So that's the other thing that you must do. Practice power positions. I don't know how many of you all have watched this TED Talk, and I don't remember the lady. Mahua, do you remember? This is the most watched TED Talk video ever, and I'll probably send it by email after this call. There is this lady who talks about power positions, Claire or something. It's the most watched TED Talk ever. She says one of the most important confidence boosters is the way you sit, the way you stand, the way you talk. So she says before you walk onto the stage to deliver a talk, in the backstage area, stand like Wonder Woman in that exact same pose. And all of you know how Wonder Woman stands, right? Rashmeet has that Wonder Woman background behind her. So she says stand like, you know, Wonder Woman stands, and that posture itself will give you a boost of confidence. When you're waiting for an interview, ensure that your posture is right. Spread yourself. She says, you know, like men sit as if they own the area that they're sitting in, and we sometimes tend to squeeze ourselves and, you know, take up as little space as possible. She says, move your hands and legs apart. Own the place that you are in, whether you're standing or sitting. And these power postures, in fact, add to your confidence. So you must watch this TED Talk if you've not already watched it, and I'll send you the link. So that is one thing, practice power postures. The next thing, and all of us have probably done it, if not, we should do it, fake it till you make it. So sometimes we are not confident, but we'll have to fake it, act as if you're confident, pretend, and then it'll come to you naturally. So keep faking it till you make it, and hopefully you won't have to fake it for long. But that is very important, because sometimes people, you know, it's a matter of fact, unless you are confident about yourself, about the points that you're making, about the value that you bring, why should others trust you, right? So self-confidence is probably the building block of success, like, you know, the entire book goes to say. So that is also the last point that we had in mind. And I'll take a pause. We are at 6:01. Any final thoughts, takeaways? Obviously, the book is very long and there's so much that we could cover. And once you read the book, those of you who've not read it, I'm sure there are many more points that come up. But given the 1 hour duration, these were a couple of key things that we must discuss. So anything else that comes to your mind as regards confidence? And for those who've read the book, any other points that you think we should mention before we close for today?
May I?
Yes, Sucharita.
Yeah, actually, I would like to share one of the biggest lesson I learned when I was 6 years old. This was right before I was going for a stage performance, and I was a bit worried because I was not very well prepared for it. So my dance teacher, it was a dance performance. So my Guruji told me before going that until and unless you tell your audience that you messed up, they will never know, because they will not know that what you have practiced, what are your steps. So just go there, do whatever you want to do, just come up confident, and they'll think that, you know, you have done an excellent job. And actually that happened. I missed so many steps. Now I think back, and everybody thought I did such a great job. So that is something I took back with me, and till date, even if I'm going for a presentation in, wherever I'm going to talk, or whenever I'm going to perform, even after that. So I always think that, okay, I know what I'm going to say. I may mess up, I may not, I may miss out points, but until and unless I give that away, nobody will never gonna know it. So yeah, that's something I just wanted to add.
That is so great, Sucharita. Thanks for sharing. That's an amazing takeaway. Usually nobody realizes. So I think if you're not confident, even if you made a mistake, I think faking confidence can take you a long way in some of these instances. Thanks for sharing.
Can I share something?
Yes. Meenakshi, go ahead.
Hi. First of all, beautiful session. I already wrote to Mahua about this session. So I wanted to talk about confidence a little bit. So maybe it is around, like, I'm 10 years old, and in neighbor there was an auntie, and she gave me a tip that whenever you need to present something in school, it was just, I still remember, it was a debate about Hindi mein tha, it was in Hindi, how to use, whether to use exported products or not. So I still remember it was in Indian language, and she asked me to practice looking at the mirror. And I think I have practiced 100 times, and I did my best in my class. Of course, it was not that I got selected or awarded, but that was the building, stone of confidence. And till today, I don't give a second thought if I need to speak in one room, one hall, one meeting, like any number of audience can come. So I think it helps a lot looking at mirror, eye to eye, talk with yourself, and it's amazing. It has done an amazing job till today.
Thanks, Meenakshi. That is so true. In fact, Mahua would also relate to this. There is this senior leader when Mahua and I worked together a couple of years ago, and he was pure magic on stage. He used to come and speak on the stage, and everyone's like spellbound and listening to him. An amazing orator. And it would look so natural. It's as if he was born to be on stage. But then later at some point, Mahua told us that the night before the presentation, he would be walking around in his room for about half an hour practicing what he had to say. And until she told us, we were imagining that, okay, fine, he's probably born with these skills. So, in order to appear natural, also you need so much practice. So that is so good. Thanks for sharing, Meenakshi.
Hi. Can I share something as well?
Yes, Brenda, please.
So one takeaway from the book was we need to shy away from being perfectionist. As women, we want to be perfect at everything. If there's a position that you want, instead of acquiring so many certifications, you already have the experience. Just apply for the position and see if you will get it. But we want everything to be in order before we even try. So the author, their advice, just try and see if you can, because men will try without all those certifications. They will go ahead and try. We need everything to be perfect, so we should shy away from that.
Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, that's a huge point from the book. Stop trying to be a perfectionist. I think you're very good as you are, and go give it a shot.
Uh, can I just end with something? So I haven't read the book, but confidence is something that I think I've learned from my own experiences. So my mother used to, tell me always, that you are like a chalice, and you always have the space of constantly learning more. So your confidence will totally come from you knowing more stuff. So she'll get me all those, she said all the general knowledge in the world that you can. She used to get me all those Derek O'Brien books. You should be the best. And I kind of started building on that. And I realized many, many moons later that even after doing that for around, 15 years, I still feel like shit and I can't speak up. It was later that my own experience taught me that while this chalice is good enough, I have to reverse the chalice for once, wherein people say shit about me, I just have to let it flow out and not let it affect me. And it is a blend of both these two things that today I am like, you know what? I know I'm good enough because I worked hard for it and I've put in my efforts. But at the same time, if I'm not good enough, I don't really care. So, this is kind of makes me a diamond, I feel. And it's my philosophy in life.
That is so amazing, Rashmi. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. Any final thoughts before we close? We are at 6 or 7. Okay. I hope all of you enjoyed the Ankita.
I just wanted to thank you, all of you. Yeah, just take the session, and it was so beautiful and so much insightful. Uh, I, I really wish to join again for the future. Thank you, Ma, for all your efforts.
Thanks, Ankita. Glad to hear that. So, as I mentioned, this is our second book club discussion, and we are extremely happy to see that people are joining from across countries. And it just helps, right, when we are sharing experiences and we realize that all of us can relate to these situations. Sometimes confidence also comes from knowing that we are not the only one. So, listening to 10 other women saying they've gone through the same thing also gives us a amount of confidence. So thank you so much for joining. We will also talk about this. I usually blog quite a lot. I'll probably write a blog about this and post it on our book club group. Do keep adding your learnings and your suggestions too. And let's keep chatting. See you on the next book club event. And Rashmeet will soon run a poll on the book club group about next month's book. So do share your suggestions. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Take care.
It's really great. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks